Good morning, everybody. I'll call this meeting to order. This is the Economic Development Committee meeting for Tuesday the 7th of March 2023. For those watching or looking at this recording later, I'm Chairperson Councillor Andrew Wiley, and to my left is Deputy Chairperson Christine Gary. In attendance we have full council, and to my left is our Senior Staff Manager of Enterprise Dunedin, John Christie. There is no public forum. I've got an apology for Councillor Vandervis for lateness. We'll move to declarations of interest. Thank you. Councillor Walker, all in favour? Aye. Declarations of interest. Members are reminded of the need to stand aside from decision making when a conflict arises between their role as an elected representative and any private or other external interests they might have. Does anybody have any changes? No? Perfect. I'll move those. Do I have a seconder? Thanks, Councillor Mayhem. All in favour? Aye. On to Part A reports. Economic Development Committee Forward Work Programme. Mr Christie.
I'd just like to note, councillors, that it does, under Study Dunedin and the Strategic Tourism Asset Protection Program, it notes that there would be a report on the agenda. Those reports will be coming to the May meeting, just for clarification.
Councillor Walker.
Warming up. Yep, thank you, Mr Chair, and thanks for the report. Probably a question for Mr Christie, I guess. It's around the Sister City and International Update Report, and just in the blue there it just says reporting as and when required. So I guess my question is there any intention moving forward to create more structure around how we report on our sister cities, and particularly in terms of that ongoing maintenance of relationships? And I know in the past we've talked about Edinburgh, and the question is there because if we don't do that, do we ask the question, what is the point?
Yes, thank you, Councillor. We're currently working on plans for our international relations, and would look to bring either a workshop or a paper to Council as soon as those reports are completed. There is a lot of thinking going on, and obviously rebuilding of our relationships in both China and Edinburgh, but also interestingly some of the work we've done over the last 3 years just by way of digital meetings also into Japan is also worth noting. So we're just packaging that up, and we'll look to bring something back to committee.
And I guess just thank you, Mr Christie. So I presume there is a full understanding, despite the good work that's gone on via through online interface, but the understanding is there that face-to-face stuff is really invaluable?
Yeah, definitely when it comes to the China relationships, we've been able to maintain really well during the inability to travel and meet face-to-face. We have done a lot of Zoom meetings with our colleagues and counterparts in China, but that face-to-face is really important, and we see that as part of the rebuild that we will need to do with those relationships over time.
Thank you.
I've got questions from Councillor Lucas, Lafiso and Gary, so Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. Two questions for Mr Christie. In regards to the destination plan, I note it says work is progressing on the draft plan. I'm just wondering what's the process from here in terms of like timing and coming back to council, and in terms of consultation?
Yes, so we are anticipating getting a draft that can be circulated to the steering group this week, and at that point we will be looking at the process for bringing that back to council. There has been a lot of consultation on the document, so at this point I don't anticipate we'll be doing further consultation on it. It will be a matter of having that document reviewed by some strategic partners, and we'll then be bringing that to council.
Okay, thank you. And my other question is actually in relation to the economic development strategy, which is not on here, but I note in a further report it was from 2013 to 2023. So I'm just wondering when that might appear on the work plan in terms of future update.
Yes, so that will be work that will be undertaken as part of the whole strategic refresh, and dates on that are yet to be determined.
Councillor Lafiso.
Tēnā koe, Mr Chair, tēnā koe, Mr Christie. Following on from Councillor Lucas's question about strategy, and I'm referring really to the annual economic profile. This is my 4 wellbeings question again. So do you anticipate in the strategy that the 4 wellbeings are incorporated into that, or does that go to strategy, economic planning and Councillor Barker's committee?
I'm pretty sure it'll be covered on both fronts. We certainly are very aware of the need for the 4 wellbeings to be considered, and are actively building that into our programs of work now.
Councillor Gary.
Asked and answered.
Thank you. Mayor Radich.
I just thought I'd give the meeting, and in particular Councillor Walker, an update on some of the activity that has taken place for me personally. I think it's good to keep councillors informed of things that I've been people I've been interacting with in terms of our sister city relationship. So in particular, the Deputy Consul General from China, he's based in Christchurch, he came to the Chinese New Year celebrations. So he had a particularly good time there. He really enjoyed himself, and we spent a lot of time discussing the Dunedin-Shanghai relationship and also his relationship with New Zealand. And the British Consul General based in Auckland, he came recently to a university event to do with marine reserves, because he's the Deputy Governor of Pitcairn Island, which is establishing a large marine reserve around that island. So he hails from Edinburgh. So I had an interesting Edinburgh discussion with him as well. So that's just 2 people of some significance that are that I've been interacting with lately, on behalf of the city. But also we did have an exchange of mayoral messages at Robbie Burns' birthday, so at that time. So St Andrew's Day it was. So, there is some relatively low-level interaction going on, but as a prelude leading into bigger and better things, hopefully over the next year or so.
Thank you. Any more questions?
Happy to move.
Seconder. Councillor Walker, thank you. All in favour? Aye. Against? Thank you. Now moving on to the Dunedin City Annual Economic Profile March 2022 update. I call to the table Manager Enterprise Need John Christie, Economic Business Relationship Manager Des Adamson, and Contractor Benji Patterson to speak to the report and respond to questions. Welcome, gentlemen. I also want to detail with councillors to please keep their questions relevant to the report, and that it is a historic report, and the executive summary talks about this report providing an update on the Infometrics Annual Economic Profile to March 2022 and Statistics New Zealand estimates to November 2022. So we're working on what has happened, not what may happen in the future. Thank you.
Perhaps through you, Mr Chair, just to introduce this paper, particularly for those new councillors, you will see, as the Chair has outlined, that this report is drawn at 31st of March 2022. The reason for that lag is so that we can ascertain correct data. Those data sets come through over time, so there is a bit of a lag effect that takes place with these reports. We do present this annually to the committee so that you have that point in time for comparators with previous years. We've also included some updated economic data that is more recent, and you'll see that is also covered in the report. It's a very positive report in the job growth numbers, which is pleasing. We do have quarterly updates of this information which we make publicly available, and I'm sure Mr Patterson would welcome any questions at this point on the report.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you for the report, Mr Patterson. It's of real interest. And I had a couple of questions. The first one is there's lots of good news in there, but it does talk about population decline, and it details that a little bit. Are you able to give any reflection on those figures as they are in the report?
Yes, Councillor Gary. So in terms of the population growth, there was a very small decline last year according to the data. Now the data breaks it into the sources of that population growth. Natural increase is always quite low across New Zealand, but what we've seen over the past couple of years have been some slightly different trends in terms of migration. We saw a few people exiting in terms of international migration with the border closures, people wanting to go home. Then the other thing for Dunedin, which I believe is a little bit of noise in the data, we've seen quite low levels of apparently of regional migration, so people moving into other parts of New Zealand. I suspect that's as much to do with how students have been, what they've been doing with their addresses and where they're residing through the COVID period, as much as it is to do with kind of reality on the ground.
So not something to be particularly concerned about in the wider picture?
Not at this stage, considering we've had quite strong job growth during the recovery period. It's something that I would closely monitor, but I would anticipate that it's likely to iron out over the next year or two when normality to day-to-day patterns returns.
Thank you. And I've got a couple of other questions. One is around recruitment of staff and whether we have any kind of picture, and Mr. Adamson might be able to have a comment here, but is there any reflection in the data around those issues coming through? It may be a wee bit early because that was March and those issues seem to come later perhaps, but do we have any insight into that?
So speaking to the data in the report here, there has been a little bit of movement in terms of availability of labour. We see that those that are receiving job seeker support have begun to now come back down from their post-COVID highs. They still are a little bit higher than they were immediately pre-COVID, but that has begun to come back down. We've also seen a little bit of an increase in wage growth, which reflects businesses needing to spend a bit more to entice staff into roles and to retain existing workers.
Thank you. And my final question is around, on page 49, I think it is, around the business units. What commentary would you have around that? Would you consider that to be a good news story?
So over the past year, there was 4.5% growth in business units in Dunedin City. That was more or less in line with the national average at 4.8%. It's a very strong growth trajectory for Dunedin entrepreneurship. Historically, it's been south of 2%. So that is a very good news story.
And my very final question, Mr. Chair, because this is a really interesting report. In the context of being pre-pandemic, are there any other highlights that you'd want to focus on?
There was one other thing that stood out, and that's related to entrepreneurship, in that there's some evidence in this report that productivity growth was quite strong over the past year. That happened nationwide, and it's testament to the innovation that occurred within businesses trying to operate under adverse conditions, and also with some labour shortages, having to really do good things with a tight supply of labour.
Thank you, and I'm happy to move when the time comes.
Thank you. So far on my question list, I've got Councillor O'Malley and Councillor Gilbert. So, Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The question I'm really asking is tonight's homework. When will that come through in these reports? Because it's been the last census didn't go well, right? So it's been a while since we've had a tight census. That's correct, right? And where will the census data come through?
I'm sorry, I'm not 100% sure on the timeline for the release of census data this time round.
Councillor Gilbert.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I understand that there are limitations, as Mr. Christie has pointed out, in terms of waiting for information to come through. And with the greatest of respect, the information is a year old. So is, for want of a much better expression, is comparatively redundant in many respects, because so much can happen and has happened in a year. So my question is there any ability, save the quarterly updates that you were mentioning, is there any ability to get a shortened time frame to be able to get this, so that we can have more up-to-date information? And I realise there are limitations that Infometrics are going to be placing and stuff, but is it possible?
We're aware of those long time frames. Some of that is to do with how taxation data is cleaned up and released ultimately to analysts. The data in this report includes not only employees, but also the self-employed, and that self-employment data comes out with a particularly long lag. Because we're aware of these lags, we did include some commentary on some partial information that we get with a shorter lag, and that showed up until the end of the year a continuation of a pretty similar trend in terms of jobs growth within businesses, so not including that self-employment picture.
But in terms of a more detailed one, no chance of getting more information in a shorter time frame or a sooner time frame?
Not a materially different time frame. Everyone relies on similar base information.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to tease out a little more the comments you made about business growth, because we all heard a week or so ago a claim at this table that there was business flight in Dunedin. Have you seen any evidence of such in these figures or elsewhere?
So speaking to the figures in the report, I see strong growth in these figures. I couldn't speak to anything outside of this report at this stage. I don't have that information.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gary moved. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Houlihan. Councillor Gary, do you want to speak to it?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If the Civic Affairs Committee is the Fun Committee, then the Economic Development Committee, I believe, is the Good News Committee, because there is good news in this report, and particularly in the context of a post-global pandemic. And yes, the data is to March 2022, but it does give us trends. And when we think of the economic development strategy, that was had an aspirational goal of 10,000 jobs and 10,000 extra income for our people. And at the time, it was considered to be a very aspirational goal. Pre-COVID, we were definitely heading on a trajectory to achieve that. We have one more year left in that 2013-2023 period, and given the rebound in several areas, that is positive. Notwithstanding that inflation has affected the actual value in real terms of earnings, but it's a whole lot better than it might have been. And as Councillor Benson Pope mentioned, some around this table would have you believe it's all doom and gloom, and that people are leaving the city in droves in terms of businesses. And we've had commentary from Mr. Patterson around the population statistics. So the strong growth in this report, reflected in this report, in terms of business, is something to be very pleased about. The extra jobs, the 800 jobs, I believe it was, that are reported are very relevant. Growth in GDP, 5.7% for Dunedin compared with 5.3% for New Zealand. And the sectors that significantly made a contribution should come as no surprise: education, specialised management and health. And we think about some of the issues or the commentary and the conversations and discussions we have around this table in recent times. Health remains a really important contributor in this city, and we need to do everything we can to keep that there and keep that strong. And in terms of education, when I was looking at some of these graphs, I was thinking about our students and our education sector, and just remind colleagues that as we speak about our student population, let's remember the contribution that the education sector makes to our city in the whole. If it wasn't for our students, the teachers and professors wouldn't have their jobs. They do contribute a great deal to the city in economic terms. So I think there's a great deal of good news in here. There's some interesting trends when we look at housing affordability, and on page 61, the graph there around rental affordability and Dunedin's place there above the national average. The discussions we had yesterday around our housing plan are very relevant when we look at those kinds of figures. It'll be some time until we see the figures for the following year from now back until March of last year, and those will be different again. But this does give us some trends. It shows it in the context of the economic development strategy over that 10-year period, and is quite extraordinary if you think about some of the challenges that this city's had in the past, and we have all had through the global pandemic. And so there's a great deal of good news. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. It is a year old, which is a challenge when we're looking at data and what we want to know, but on the page dunedinNZ.com is the data until December 2022, which is what I want to talk about here, because it's interesting to see the trends and what's happened in the past, but it's also interesting to see what's going on in the economy now. So we've noted in the report, we have a huge dependence on health and education, which are also funded by government. So we need to be concerned about how much influence government has over what they're actually spending in health and education. So we need to keep an eye on that, and also to try and work and make our economy robust so we don't depend so much on government money. I was interested about the noise in the data. First of all, we've got the COVID noise, and you can see all the big falls in a lot of the data, and also the way that students affect a lot of that data when it's a sixth of our population, which is probably informing perhaps the low productivity, I'm not quite sure, but also the household income and the per person income. Real concerns around affordable rents, and Dunedin is 28% affordability against 22% for the rest of New Zealand, so that's something to think about, as Councillor Gary has brought up. Just have some statistics around December 2022 for you all to think about. So our employment is actually growing faster than the rest of New Zealand. It's nearly double at 2.5% as compared to the average in New Zealand of 1.3%. GDP, it's probably within the margin of error, but it is higher at 3.2% for Dunedin, above 2.8% for New Zealand. Job seeker benefits are down significantly as well. They're down 13%. In New Zealand is 10.9%, and non-residential consents are leaping up at 17.8%, as above the New Zealand average of 13.1%. So those are the good news stories. The things that we do need to be concerned about: consumer spending is 7% lower in Dunedin than the rest of New Zealand, so we're up 3.2%, and New Zealand is up 10.3%. Real concerns around tourism. Tourism expenditure is up 9.1% for Dunedin, in New Zealand 18.1%, so we're 9% lagging behind. Guest nights also up 14.3% for Dunedin, but in New Zealand they're up 22.4%, so there's an 8% difference. So there are some headwinds that we need to understand and we need to be concerned about. That's why we're asking about the destination plan. And also I really want to focus on, Councillor, I think, did you bring up, Councillor Lucas, the economic development strategy, because it is out of date and I think it needs to be first off the block, and we do need to concentrate on getting that strategy done, because we are sitting there kind of with no strategy at the moment when we do actually have some headwinds that we are seeing in the most up-to-date figures. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barker. No more. Mayor Raddick.
Yes, I see this as a very positive report, and I would like to, I suppose, draw attention to some of the key areas of a gain in the report. So page 71 and 70 and 71, the annual average tourism GDP growth is quite a lot higher in Dunedin than in the country as an average. And on page 64, the employment growth by broad occupation, we're quite a lot better off in terms of professionals. So, and similarly in terms of professional and self-employed and so forth, we are doing quite well throughout this report. However, our household income overall lags a bit behind, and our general wage earnings are a bit behind the rest of the country. So we are well supplied with professionals, but we could do with more growth in businesses. So there is not so much self-employed growth in Dunedin, although we do seem to be gaining. So I see a lot of positives for business in New Zealand, and productivity is picking up in Dunedin. So we've had quite a growth of productivity, and on page 47, the graph there, productivity growth of just the last year or so has really taken off, and we didn't experience the deep dip that the rest of the country experienced. So to me, it's trending in the right direction. This report is trending in the right direction for employment growth and earnings growth, which are our two key targets in the economic in ED. So there's positivity to be taken, I think.
Councillor van der Vis.
There are certainly positives in this report, and I'm very glad to see them, especially earnings lift, although the claim that they're going to be, near the 10,000 increase over 10 years that was hoped for, I don't read the graph that way at all. It's positive, but not getting near what we hoped. If we look at actual business, if we look at actual numbers of people, and we compare them to the rest of New Zealand, despite some positives, we have Dunedin spending, which is lagging 7.3%. We have employment growth, which is behind New Zealand. We have household income, which is behind New Zealand. We have general earnings, which is behind New Zealand. And especially employment growth. This is where your real business indicator is, I believe. Our employment growth has lagged behind the rest of New Zealand for 20 years now. We have not addressed employment growth. You look at the graph, it's plain to see there isn't 1 year in 20 years that we have exceeded New Zealand average. And the New Zealand average, remember, takes into all sorts of little towns and whatever. We're a city. We used to be city number 4 not that long ago. We're now struggling to be 7 or 8. Employment growth lagging for 20 years, to me, is a red flag. We need to do something about promoting business here. Great that we've got more professionals here, especially with the university and the medical school, and that's lifted the average earnings. But if you look at the lot of most of the people that we represent, we don't have employment growth, we don't have New Zealand average household income, and all of those things really need to improve. What is it about Dunedin that makes us lag behind in all of these different areas? You can look at the positives. and there are some in here, but if you look at the underlying fundamentals, the number of people, population growth lags New Zealand, employment growth lags. We need to address those. And, pointing out the one or two highlights in this report, I don't think does that. Thank you.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just feel compelled to speak now. Dunedin is a Tier 2 medium growth city, so hardly the kind of status you get when you're in the throes of failure. If you look at those graphs, what you find is that within the margin of error of the graphs, we're basically tracking what the nation does. It does not do us any good to sit around and find all the negative news we can find, and that's the only thing we talk about. Fact of the matter is, this is an attractive city. It attracts people, and I'm part of that medical growth component. I'm one of those people who came back and chose this city quite deliberately from an overseas career for the purposes of living here. And that's what really Dunedin is about. All that stuff we do secondary to this, the adventure playgrounds, that stuff, that's all about livability. That's why we're doing quite well at attracting and retaining people. And they come in with their own money and their own ideas, and they develop the economy. It serves us nothing at all to turn around and say that we're dying when we're not. And really, I actually do ask this question, what is wrong with this part of Dunedin? The part of Dunedin that always wants to complain and say it's cold, no one will ever eat outside in Dunedin, no one will ever do this in Dunedin, and we're doing it to ourselves. People who do that are telling people to leave. Well, I don't want them to leave, I want them to come. And frankly, I want them to come on the statement that I'll say, which is I returned here 9 years ago, and it was the best thing I ever did. Thank you.
Councillor Walker.
Thank you. I do have the dodgy mic today, unless you're pressing it. I wasn't going to speak, but the two previous speakers have inspired me to speak for different reasons. And I'll defer to much of what the last speaker said, and I agree with him completely. The city is absolutely not dying. It's growing, it's buzzing, it's amazing. I am one of those people who moved here from another country. That's obvious with this awful accent I have, with my American academic wife who could earn twice the money in most other cities in the world. We moved here because it's an attractive place to live. And I, like everyone around this table, speak to employers. We have a number of you who are employers, whether it's nurses, doctors, academics, baristas, cooks, bus drivers, cleaners, social workers. The list is endless. People cannot employ people. That's the problem at the moment. So I look forward to next year when we do see the stats. I remind you, the problem at the moment for businesses is getting workers. Thank you.
Councillor Houlihan.
Yes, I wasn't going to speak, but I will now as well. Thank you for inspiring that, Councillor O'Malley. Yes, well, I had 12 years away from Dunedin. I grew up here, I went to school here, but I came back with a husband from out of town, and after 12 years away, I can't think of a better place to raise a family than Dunedin. Dunedin Otipoti it's cultural. We're like a mini Wellington in the way that we have we did have a very strong arts scene, but we still do. And we've got Fringe starting soon. We have a yearly Fringe and yearly arts festival. A lot of cities don't have that. We have a lot of vibrancy, and as far as our heritage, our buildings, when you walk around, are just awe-inspiring. And our businesses, we have a very lively, I used to regularly, this is quite a few years ago now when I lived in Auckland, but I'd go to the BA5s and with the Chamber of Commerce up there through my work, and you know, we have as many people, if not more, come to the Chamber's functions down here. The businesses are interacting, they're working together, many of the businesses know each other. And what I find is that, you know, Auckland was very spread out, you get that with a bigger city, but here the advantage is everything's close by. You can whip home for lunch if you want to, you can you can walk around, you know, all the shops very closely. We have a compact city that is vibrant. We have many students in our city that bring a lot of that vibrancy. I think there's a lot to be said for Dunedin, and many people want to live here. I'm certainly delighted I live here, and certainly with the schools, the quality of schools that we have in Dunedin, I would say, would equally be on par with any of the best in the country.
Councillor Gary, you're right to reply.
Wow. Where to start? I just want to begin with Councillor Barker's comments and just remind people that we are considering a report that goes to March 2022, and the Chair prefaced that at the start. And yes, there will be other figures and we will consider those at the time, and we're aware of some of the trends that are happening in our community at the moment. But this report is about that particular period up until March 2022. I do just want to highlight the residential building sector, 145 jobs just in that area. That tells you something. That's a story all of its own. And remember what Mr. Patterson said about entrepreneurship and innovation and the importance of that in our city. Mayor Raddick talked about trending in the right direction, and that was my point, Councillor van der Vis, not about claiming that we were getting close, but that we are trending towards the goal in the EDS. Councillor van der Vis, I believe most of his commentary was really talking our city down. And the final...
Point of order. I was not talking the city down. I was simply highlighting the facts that have been put in front of us. I have not said the city was dying as being claimed. I have not talked the city down. I've simply pointed out how much Dunedin lags on so many of the statistics that are factually here in front of us.
Mr. Chair.
And I ask the councillor to withdraw the statement.
Speaker to the point of order. You'll recall, in fact, that recently the councillor made a completely baseless claim of business flight.
Point of order. I did not make a baseless
Councillor
about business flight.
We're listening.
That was challenged at the time by the figures that that the Economic Development Unit provided. It's just been challenged again by the comments that Mr. Patterson made. That was completely baseless, what was suggested, and if anyone was ever talking the city down, it was a statement like that, which was just not true.
At this time, I'm going to take a leave of absence for adjournment for I'm out of here. I'm gone. No, okay. Second, Councillor Walker. He was first up. So what we'll do is we'll take a 5-minute break. All right. Okay, I'll call the meeting back to order. So for clarity's sake, we had Councillor Gary speaking. We had a point of order from Councillor Vandervis. Councillor Vandervis, what was your point of order? What number was it and what was it for?
The point of order was that I was inaccurately quoted as claiming that, amongst other things, Dunedin was dying.
Councillor, I'm asking what number, what...
I don't have the numbers in front of me currently, but...
so what I'm understanding, it was 25.2 misrepresentation, is that what you're...
25.2D, if you want the particular number.
Yes, I do, yep, thank you. Okay, thank you. I will uphold that point of order, but I am conscious of what that narrative was. So, Councillor Gary, please resume.
I didn't realise that expressing a difference of opinion, as I'm 25.3, I'm a little confused about that. But however, I will continue. Some around this table have quite a different interpretation of the figures before us. If we'd been listening carefully to Mr. Patterson, there was plenty of good news in there up to March 2022. And in particular, the growth in business units on page 49 of 4.5%. And in the commentary, I just bring your attention to it, it indicates an environment in which entrepreneurs are prepared to take risks to start new ventures. Councillor Vandervis talked about promoting businesses and that being important. And I know that there's a great deal of work going on in that area. That is what the bread and butter of the Enterprise Dunedin. My point is that we're trending in the right direction, and the last three speakers talked about what this city has to offer and what attracts people here. And this report, I believe, reflects the great small city that we live in, the vibrancy, the vitality, the activity going on. People talked about the heritage buildings, but in this report it talks about people coming to do business here, people growing jobs. There are issues around housing affordability, yes, but if you look at the graphs, it's trending in the right direction in many of those areas where there is some concern. What the figures will be between last March and this March is another matter, and we will see that report, albeit Councillor Gilbert in a delayed way, and that's not ideal, but we've had it explained to us the why of that, and we'll look to those. In the meantime, the work will continue at Enterprise Dunedin, and we will be starting to look, no doubt, through the strategic refresh that we know is underway to see a new economic development strategy, which does, Councillor Lefiso, include those four well-beings that we're also conscious of, and it will be a different approach to the economic development strategy that was the 10,000 new jobs and $10,000 lift in earnings. Thank you.
Thank you. The motion was seconded by Councillor Houlihan, so I'll take that. All in favour, say aye.
Division, please.
Okay.
Councillor Ackland.
Aye.
Councillor Barker.
Aye.
Councillor Benson Pope. Councillor Gary.
Aye.
Councillor Gilbert.
Aye.
Councillor Houlihan.
Aye.
Councillor Fiso.
Aye.
Councillor Lucas.
Aye.
Councillor Mayhem.
Aye.
Councillor O'Malley.
Aye.
Mayor Raddick.
Aye.
Councillor Vandervis.
Yes.
Councillor Walker. Councillor Weatherall.
Aye.
Councillor Wiley.
Yes.
Motion carried unanimously.
Thank you. On to item 6, Dunedin Regional Events Fund update report to end December 2022. I call to the table Ms Van Velde and Tammy Jackman and Penny Nelson. And Mr Christie, would you like to introduce it?
I just got one update through the chair, and that's to let you know that we've just been informed that the Live Nation Fortune Festival won't be taking place. So we'll be checking with MB as to what that will mean around the funding that was allocated to that event.
Okay, questions, councillors? Councillor Barker.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this fund was to increase the out-of-town visitation. So I can see some notes beside some of the events, and I just wonder how overall is the investment being measured, and how will that be reported?
I can talk to how it's been reported to MB as the party who has provided funding for this. So we, the Dunedin City Council and Enterprise Dunedin, report to MB on a 6-month period. We have a set of criteria that we need to report to MB regarding the length of stay of visitors in Dunedin, the average daily expenditure, the total event attendees, and the out-of-town visitors to the event.
So can I also ask, because obviously some of these festivals have significant council money put into them, will we be getting the MB report coming back to council as well, or is that just for MB?
At this stage, it's just for MB. When the fund is finished, when all the events, they will provide guidance on what they would like in terms of a final wrap-up.
Councillor Lucas.
Thank you. So the funding, the MB funding, has finished as of this year. So my question really is, some of these events have had significant funding, and knowing that the way that a lot of the events operate, have we got some scaffolding around those events in terms of going forward that they, I mean, you look at the International Science Festival, they've had like 155,000 over the period from MB, and that's a lot of funding into their event over, you know, I mean, I realise it's over 2 events. Have we done anything to work with them to make sure that the event can be sustainable, well, not just the Science Festival, but these events can be sustainable when this significant funding is no longer available?
So the funding was given just to tide things over. While we didn't have international visitors coming through, the borders were closed. It's been quite clear that that's the reason that it's there, and there is no more MB funding. I'm not aware that anything else has been done, but they have been aware that this is a one-off funding.
I'm sorry, maybe my question wasn't clear enough. I know that they are aware of that. My question is, have we as a council been working with them to support them going forward? As I said, kind of like scaffolding them, because if you suddenly, that is a lot of funding that has gone on to, not only, it won't only be into promotion and publicity, but how that they are going to continue on a sustainable way without that significant funding.
The council adopts a cross-council approach to working with major community and premier events, of which some of these events fall into here. So if an event needs specific assistance around any area of navigating council, we make sure that that is supported. So when funding was provided for these events, discussions about how you will be sustainable in the future without this funding was held with events so that they could continue knowing that this was specific funding.
Councillor O'Malley.
I haven't actually been a good attender recently, but I am the councillor attached to that festival, and I just wanted to say that they actually do a lot of checking of sustainability and profitability. So, and this was effectively a one-off. Thanks.
Councillor Houlihan.
Thank you. Are you able to tell us a little bit more about the Festival of Interactive Narrative and Storytelling? It sounds fascinating, and I'm wondering around that, because it's connected to code, have we got any particular goals we'd like to achieve from, you know, for the city? Like, because obviously I'm not sure if this is what it is, but if it's storytelling and narrative around digital storytelling, you know, it's an opportunity for us to get some of our stories about our city to the world, if that's a possibility, but I don't know if it is or not. But what are we working alongside this festival, and is there any goals we've got for a city to hopefully achieve from this? And what, I mean, it might not be that's possible, but what are the, can you tell us what it actually is, a bit more about it?
Yeah, so it is a digital or an interactive festival, and the same framework applies as in the festival decides what will be in its program, and as a council we will support them with what they need to be able to deliver. So it might be we may support with marketing in terms of ensuring that we support their messaging, FYI, things like that. So the content of the program is decided by the festival, but they do tick many of our strategies. As a startup event, we're very supportive of this.
I'm not sure if this fits in with it, but have we considered sponsoring any digital influencers to attend this? To, you know, like, it's a bit like, what would you call it, social proofing, where a city or a company or a person might pick someone who's a really large digital user, so they have a lot of influence, yes, they've got a lot of followers, to go to something like this, and obviously then stream on it about our city and things like that.
Councillor Houlihan, I'll get Mr Christie to answer that question.
Yeah, just to be really clear, we're a facilitator of the fund, not the organiser of these events. So whilst we work closely with them, these are their events. We're simply the conduit for applying some of the funding. The Code one in particular is a new event, so we're really keen to see that succeed, obviously, but it will be up to the Board of Code as to how that event runs.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, we can certainly pass that on to them, Councillor.
Okay, I'm happy to move this from the chair. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Gary. I'm just briefly speaking to it. I'm just going to thank staff for this paper and the detailed nature of it, and I can tell by the impact that these events do have on the city, but it also maintains that vibrancy for our city. And the other key is that when you look at the range of events here, there is many events that our community can attend. There's a lot of good free aspects to it, a lot of international appeal to them as well. So it's great to have a strong, vibrant event space here in Dunedin. And so when we look at this, we do see that actually there is a lot of life happening, and a lot of life and energy happening in our event space. And when you note around town, you'll see how many delegates are coming and visiting Dunedin, as you see their lanyards hanging around their neck, around the octagon and throughout the city. And I think that's really powerful, that so many these festivals and conferences do appeal to our city, and the delegates enjoy coming here. Perfect. I'll put it all to the vote. All in favour? Aye. Against? Okay, on the chime of the bells, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you.